I bought this cabin for one reason: silence. Not luxury, not neighbors, not rules. Just the kind of quiet that settles into your bones and makes you forget the world. For 3 years, that silence never broke until the morning. I saw 3 flashlights crawling across my windows at 5:12 a.m. No knock, no notice. Just HOA Karen's self-declared patrol team stomping across my porch, measuring my windows like they were planning a break-in. Karen Whitmore herself was barking orders. The same woman who'd spent the last 4 months trying to force me into her imaginary HOA with threatening letters. Fake fees. And now this. She thought showing up with her goons at dawn would finally break me. What she didn't know was that I don't break. When one of her patrol members stepped toward my bedroom window with a tape measure in hand, I opened my cabinet and racked my shotgun. That metallic click cut through the cold air like a judge's gavel. They froze instantly. And that's when Karen finally understood something. Every inch of this land is documented, recorded, and legally ironclad. And I'd been collecting evidence on her for months. 10 minutes later, Sheriff Briggs pulled into my driveway with lights flashing, and the sound of handcuffs snapping shut on Karen's wrists was louder than my shotgun ever needed to be. That was just the beginning. If you're watching this from somewhere else, drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from, because what happened next is something every property owner needs to hear. My name is Reed Dalton, 52 years old, former construction project manager, current owner of 45 acres of pine forest, and one cabin that sits 2 miles outside the Pine Ridge subdivision in Larkspur, Colorado. I bought this land in 2022 for one reason: peace. The kind you can't buy in a neighborhood with covenants and architectural review boards. The kind that comes from owning dirt that answers to nobody but you. For 3 years, I had exactly that. No neighbors close enough to complain about my firewood pile. No rules about what color I could paint my mailbox. No meetings, no fees, no Karen with a clipboard telling me my grass was half an inch too tall. Just silence, coffee on the porch at dawn, and the occasional elk wandering through the clearing behind my shed. Then, 3 weeks ago, I found the first letter in my mailbox. Plain white envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my name written in neat block letters across the front. I opened it standing right there at the end of my gravel driveway, still holding my truck keys. Inside was a single sheet of paper on Pine Ridge HOA letterhead. The message was short. Annual dues notice. Amount due $500. Payment due by June 1st, 2025. Failure to remit will result in late fees and potential lien enforcement. I read it twice. Then I walked back to the cabin, pulled my property deed from the file cabinet, and spread it out on the kitchen table. I'd read that deed 100 times when I bought the place. No HOA covenant, no CC and Rs, no restrictions of any kind except county zoning. The land was mine, free and clear. I folded the letter, dropped it in the trash, and forgot about it. A week later, the second letter arrived. Same envelope, same handwriting. This one had a different tone. Second notice, overdue HOA dues, $500, late fee, $50, total due, $550. Payment is now 30 days overdue. Please remit immediately to avoid further action. I didn't throw this one away. Instead, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and called the Douglas County Assessor's Office. The woman who answered was polite and efficient. I gave her my parcel number and asked a simple question. Does this property fall under any homeowners association jurisdiction? She put me on hold for 2 minutes. When she came back, her answer was clear. No, Mr. Dalton, your parcel is outside the Pine Ridge subdivision boundaries. There is no HOA attached to your deed. I thanked her, hung up, and opened my email. I typed out a short message to the address printed on the letterhead. I am not a member of Pine Ridge HOA. My property is not subject to your fees. Do not contact me again. I attached a scan of my deed and hit send. The email bounced back within seconds. Address not found. That's when I started paying attention. The third letter came exactly 1 week later. This one was thicker. I opened it on the porch. standing in the last light of the day with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. Inside was a 2-page document. The first page was another notice. Final notice. Total amount due, $750, including fees and penalties. Failure to comply will result in lien enforcement and legal action. The second page was a photocopy of a hand-drawn map. Someone had taken a county plat map, traced the boundaries of Pine Ridge subdivision in black ink, and then extended those boundaries in red marker to include my property and 4 other parcels nearby. At the top of the page, in the same block letters from the envelopes, were the words Pine Ridge HOA Expansion Plan 2025. My cabin was circled in red. Twice. I didn't get angry. Anger makes you stupid. Instead, I went inside, sat down at my computer, and did what I do best: research. I searched Pine Ridge HOA, Colorado, and found a bare bones website that looked like it had been built in 2010 and never updated. The homepage had a stock photo of a suburban street and a tagline that read, "Protecting Property Values Since 2018. There was a tab for board members. I clicked it. 3 names: Karen Whitmore, President; Douglas Fairbank, Vice President; Ronald Pierce, Treasurer. No photos. No contact information beyond a generic email address. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it HOA Investigation. I took screenshots of everything: the website, the board member page, the dues notice language, the fake expansion map. Then I printed the whole packet, punched holes in the pages, and filed it in a 3-ring binder. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was worried, because I was thinking. Someone was trying to force me into an HOA I'd never agreed to join. Someone thought they could slap a fake map on county records and collect fees from people who didn't owe them a cent. Someone thought I wouldn't notice, or wouldn't care, or wouldn't fight back. They were wrong on all 3 counts. At 2 a.m., I got out of bed, walked out to my truck, and pulled a cardboard box from the back seat. Inside were 2 Ring cameras I'd bought 3 months earlier after someone smashed a neighbor's mailbox with a baseball bat. I'd been meaning to install them, but hadn't gotten around to it. Now I had a reason. I spent the next hour mounting 1 camera above my front door and another on a pine tree at the edge of my driveway, angled to catch anyone coming up the gravel road. Both cameras are connected to my phone. Both sent instant alerts. Both were recorded to the cloud. By 3 a.m., I was back in bed. By 5:12 a.m., my phone was buzzing on the nightstand. Motion detected. Driveway camera. I grabbed the phone, opened the app, and saw 3 vehicles rolling slowly up my driveway in the pre-dawn dark. SUVs, headlights off, moving like they didn't want to be seen. I watched the 3 SUVs roll to a stop in front of my cabin through the camera feed on my phone. The timestamp read 5:12 a.m. The sky was still black. No birds yet. No wind. Just the low idle of 3 engines and the crunch of gravel under tires. For 30 seconds, nobody moved. Then the doors opened. 6 people stepped out. 3 of them wore reflective safety vests with the words HOA Patrol printed across the back in block letters. The other 3 carried clipboards, flashlights, and what looked like a tape measure. I recognized the woman in the baseball cap immediately. Karen Whitmore. I'd seen her face on the Pine Ridge HOA website. She was shorter than I expected, maybe 5'4", with blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, and the kind of posture that said she was used to people doing what she told them. She pointed at my porch, said something I couldn't hear through the camera audio, and 2 of the vest wearers moved toward my front windows with their flashlights raised. I didn't panic. Panic makes you sloppy. Instead, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I kept my voice low and calm. "This is Reed Dalton at 4215 Pine Forest Road. I have 6 people trespassing on my property right now. They're shining flashlights through my windows and measuring my house without permission." The dispatcher asked if I felt threatened. I told her yes. She said a unit was on the way. I hung up, got out of bed, pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt, and walked downstairs in bare feet. I didn't turn on any lights. I moved to the living room window and stood behind the curtain, watching. The 2 patrol members were shining their maglights directly through the glass, sweeping the beams across my furniture like they were cataloging evidence at a crime scene. One of them pulled out a tape measure and started measuring the gap between my window frame and the security bars I'd installed last year. The other one took photos with a phone. Karen stood on the porch steps, arms crossed, directing traffic. A man in his 60s with a gray beard, Douglas Fairbanks, I assumed, was walking around the side of the cabin toward my back door. Another man, younger, maybe 40, was writing something on a clipboard. That would be Ronald Pierce. I walked to my gun cabinet in the hallway, unlocked it, and pulled out my Remington 870. I kept it loaded with birdshot for coyotes, but tonight I swapped the shells for blanks. I wasn't planning to shoot anyone. I was planning to make a point. I racked a shell into the chamber. The metallic clack echoed through the cabin like a crack of thunder. Outside, all 3 flashlights stopped moving. I waited 5 seconds. Then I walked to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped onto the porch. The cold hit me first, then the silence. 6 pairs of eyes locked on me. I kept the shotgun angled down, barrel pointed at the deck boards, finger off the trigger. My voice came out calm, flat, the way you'd tell someone the time. "You're trespassing on private property. The sheriff is already on his way." Karen didn't flinch. She turned toward me, lowered her clipboard, and smiled. Not a friendly smile, the kind of smile that says I know something you don't. "Mr. Dalton," she said. Her voice was sharp, clipped, like a schoolteacher addressing a student who'd forgotten his homework. "We're not trespassing. We're conducting a routine compliance inspection under the authority of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. You received 3 notices regarding your overdue fees. This is the next step in our enforcement process." I didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at her. "I don't owe you anything," I said. "My property isn't part of your HOA." Karen tilted her head slightly, like she was considering whether to explain something to a child. "Your property falls within the expanded jurisdiction as approved by our board in March of this year. You were notified by mail. Failure to respond constitutes acceptance of the terms." I almost laughed. Almost. "Show me the covenant," I said. Karen's smile tightened. "We don't need a covenant. The expansion was voted on and approved. You can review the minutes at our next board meeting." I shifted my weight slightly, just enough to make the porch boards creak under my boots. "Get off my land!" That's when Douglas Fairbanks stepped around the corner from the back of the cabin, holding his phone up like he was recording. "Mr. Dalton," he said, his voice thin and reedy, "you're threatening HOA personnel with a deadly weapon. That's a criminal offense. We have witnesses." I turned my head just enough to look at him. "I'm standing on my own porch, holding my own gun, on my own property. You're the one trespassing. And yeah, I've got witnesses too." I nodded toward the camera, mounted under the eave. Its little red LED was blinking steadily. Douglas looked up at it. His face went pale. Karen's smile vanished. "Turn that off," she snapped at him. "I'm not the one who turned it on," I said. "It's motion activated. Been recording since you pulled in." The standoff stretched out for another few minutes. Karen started pacing on my porch like she owned it, muttering to Douglas about documentation and legal precedent. I just stood there, shotgun still down, watching, waiting. Then I heard the sirens. Faint at first, then louder, echoing up through the trees from the main road. Karen heard them too. Her eyes flicked toward the driveway, then back to me. "You called the cops," Ronald Pierce said, his voice climbing half an octave. "On us." I didn't answer. I just stood there, shotgun still angled down, watching Karen's face as the red and blue lights started flickering through the pines. Sheriff Nolan Briggs pulled into my driveway a moment later in a white Chevy Tahoe with Douglas County Sheriff printed across the door. He stepped out slowly, one hand resting on his duty belt, and looked from me to the 6 people standing in my yard. "Morning. Reed," he said. His voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice you'd use to talk someone off a ledge. "Got a call about a disturbance?" I nodded. "Morning. Nolan. These folks were measuring my windows at 5 a.m. without permission. Thought you should know." Sheriff Briggs turned to Karen. "You got a reason to be on Mr. Dalton's property." "Ma'am." Karen straightened, lifted her clipboard like it were a badge. "We're with the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. We're conducting a lawful inspection. Briggs frowned. You got a warrant? Karen blinked. We don't need a warrant. We have jurisdiction. Briggs shook his head slowly. Not how it works. This property is outside the Pine Ridge subdivision. I checked the plat map on the way over. You've got no authority here. Karen's jaw tightened. We have documentation proving otherwise. Briggs held out his hand. Let's see it. Karen hesitated. Then she pulled a folded piece of paper from her clipboard and handed it over. Briggs unfolded it, squinted at it under his flashlight, and let out a low whistle. This is a hand-drawn map, he said, not a legal document. He folded it back up and looked back at Karen. His expression hardened. Ma'am, you just admitted to inspecting without authority on private property at 5 in the morning. That's criminal trespass. And this fake map, combined with those fee notices Mr. Dalton told me about, that's attempted fraud. Karen's face went white. You can't be serious. Briggs pulled his handcuffs from his belt. Turn around. Ma'am. Karen didn't move. She stared at him like he'd just told her the sky was green. I'm the president of an HOA. You can't arrest me for doing my job. Briggs stepped closer, his voice dropping to something cold and final. Turn around. Now. Karen's mouth opened, closed. Then she turned. Briggs pulled her wrists behind her back, and I heard the sound I'd been waiting for, the metallic snap of handcuffs locking shut. It echoed across the clearing, louder than my shotgun rack, louder than the idling engines, louder than anything else that morning. Karen Whitmore, Briggs said. You're under arrest for criminal trespass and attempted fraud. You have the right to remain silent. He walked her to the Tahoe, opened the back door, and guided her inside. Karen didn't say a word. She just stared at me through the window, her face twisted with something between rage and disbelief. Briggs turned to the other 5. The rest of you, get in your vehicles and leave. If I see any of you back on this property without Mr. Dalton's written permission, you'll be joining her. Douglas and Ronald didn't need to be told twice. They practically ran to their SUVs. Within 2 minutes, the other vehicles were gone, taillights disappearing down the driveway in a cloud of dust. Briggs walked back over to me. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. He looked at the shotgun still in my hands. You didn't point that at anyone, did you? I shook my head. Never left the porch, never raised it above waist level. Just wanted them to know I was serious. Briggs grunted. Smart. But Reed, listen, that woman's got a reputation, even in custody. Her people don't let go easily. You might want to think about getting a lawyer. I met his eyes. Already got one. Briggs nodded slowly. Good. I'll be in touch for a statement. And keep that camera footage. He climbed into his Tahoe, Karen still sitting stone-faced in the back seat, and drove off. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat down at my kitchen table. My hands weren't shaking. My pulse was steady. I opened my laptop, pulled up the camera footage, and watched the whole thing again from the beginning. Karen is measuring my windows. Douglas is sneaking around back. Ronald is taking notes. The handcuffs snapped shut. All of it is IMMI-stamped. All of it backed up to the cloud. Then I opened my email and sent the video file to Lydia Foster, the lawyer I'd hired 2 days ago. Subject line: Evidence, criminal trespass and arrest, May 22nd. I hit send and closed the laptop. The sun was just starting to rise outside my window, painting the pines in shades of orange and gold. I made coffee. I sat on the porch, and I waited. 3 hours later, I walked out to check my mailbox. There was nothing inside except a piece of plywood leaning against the post. Someone had nailed it there while I wasn't looking. Painted across it in bright red letters were the words, Property under HOA lien. Unpaid dues, $750. No tire tracks I could see. No engine sounds I'd heard. Whoever left it didn't want to be seen. I pulled out my phone, took 3 photos from different angles, and added them to the evidence folder. I spent the rest of that morning doing what I do best: documentation. The plywood sign from my mailbox was now sitting on my kitchen table, photographed from every angle, tagged with the date and time I found it. The camera footage was backed up in 3 places: cloud storage, an external hard drive, and a thumb drive I kept in my truck's glove box. I wasn't taking chances. Karen Whitmore might be sitting in a Douglas County holding cell right now, but that didn't mean this was over. People like her don't go quietly. They lawyer up, post bail, and come back twice as hard. I needed to be ready. So I opened my laptop, pulled up the Douglas County Clerk's website, and started digging. The property records search page loaded slowly, the kind of government website that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. I entered my parcel number and waited. When the results came back, I scrolled through every line. Owner of record Reed Dalton. Purchase date September 15th, 2022. Liens none. Encumbrances none. HOA covenant none. I screenshot the whole page, saved it to my evidence folder, and then picked up my phone. The Douglas County Clerk's office answered on the fourth ring. A woman's voice, polite but tired. I gave her my parcel number and asked if there were any liens filed against my property in the last 6 months. She put me on hold. 2 minutes later, she came back. No, Mr. Dalton, your property is clean. No liens of any kind. I thanked her and asked one more question. If someone posted a sign claiming a lien that doesn't exist, what's that called? She paused. That would be fraud, sir. You'd want to report that to the sheriff. I told her I already had, thanked her again, and hung up. Then I called Lydia Foster. Lydia picked up on the second ring. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Reed, I got your email. Watched the footage twice. Karen Whitmore got herself arrested. Her voice had the faint edge of someone trying not to sound impressed. I gave her the short version. The 5 a.m. trespass, the confrontation, and Sheriff Briggs putting Karen in cuffs. Lydia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she let out a long breath. Okay, that's good for you. Bad for her, but here's the thing. She's going to post bail, probably today. And when she does, she's going to be angry, humiliated. People in her position don't de-escalate. They double down. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the pines swaying in the morning breeze. What do you need from me? Lydia's tone shifted into lawyer mode. I need you to prove this isn't an isolated incident. If Karen's been pulling this scam on other people, we need their stories, witnesses, victims. The more evidence we have of a pattern, the harder it is for her to claim this was a misunderstanding. I told her I'd already been thinking the same thing. She said that didn't surprise her. Get me names, addresses, and copies of any letters they received, photos, if they have them. And Reed, don't go alone. Bring someone with you. A witness makes everything cleaner. I told her I'd handle it, and hung up. Then I pulled up Google Maps on my laptop and started searching for cabins within a 10-mile radius of Pine Ridge subdivision. I found 4. Owen Blackford, Miller Hart, Jenna Colebrook, Brookhaven. I grabbed my keys, pulled on a jacket, and headed for the truck. Owen Blackford's place was the closest, about 6 miles west on a dirt road that wound through thick stands of ponderosa pine. His cabin was small, maybe 800 square feet, with a green metal roof and a woodpile stacked neatly under a tarp. I knocked on the door and waited. Owen answered after a minute, wearing flannel pajama pants and a Colorado Rockies t-shirt. He was in his late 60s, gray-haired, with the kind of weathered face you get from decades of teaching high school biology in rural counties. He recognized me immediately. Reed Dalton. Right, I saw you at the hardware store a couple of months back. I nodded. That's me. Sorry to show up unannounced, but I need to ask you something. Have you ever gotten letters from Pine Ridge HOA asking for dues? Owen's expression shifted. He stepped back and opened the door wider. You'd better come in. We sat at his kitchen table, and Owen pulled a shoebox from the top of his refrigerator. Inside were 5 letters, all in the same white envelopes I'd been getting. He spread them out in front of me. The first one was dated January 10th, 2025. Annual dues notice, amount due $300. The amounts escalated with each letter. $300, $350, $400, $500. The last one, dated April 20th, threatened legal action and foreclosure. I pulled out my phone and photographed each letter, front and back. Owen watched me work. You're collecting evidence, aren't you? I looked up. Yeah. How'd you know? Owen smiled faintly. I taught science for 38 years. I know what documentation looks like. He leaned back in his chair. I stopped opening them after the third one. Figured if they were serious, they'd show up in person. Have they ever done that to you? I told him about this morning. The patrol team, the tape measures, the arrest. Owen's eyes went wide. Sheriff Briggs actually arrested Karen Whitmore. I nodded. Owen let out a low whistle. Good. That woman's been a menace for years. I asked if I could keep the letters. Owen said absolutely. Then he gave me the names of 2 other people he knew who'd gotten similar letters. Miller Hart and Jenna Colebrook. I already had them on my list. I thanked Owen, told him I'd keep him updated, and drove to Miller's place next. Miller Hart lived 4 miles south in a cabin he'd built himself back in the 90s. He was a carpenter, 62 years old, with hands like vice grips and a voice like gravel. He invited me onto his porch, offered me a beer. I declined and pulled out his own stack of HOA letters. 6 of them. The first one demanded $500. When he didn't pay, they sent him a second notice for $750, then $1,000, then $1,200. I paid $500 last year, Miller said, shaking his head. Thought it'd make them go away. Instead, they just kept asking for more. I asked if he had receipts. He did. A check made out to Pine Ridge HOA, dated June 5th, 2024, for $500, cashed 2 weeks later. I photographed everything. Miller asked me what I was planning to do with all this. I told him I was building a case. He grinned. You need a witness. You call me. Jenna Colebrook was last on my list. She lived 8 miles east in a cabin with solar panels on the roof and a vegetable garden out front. She was a nurse at the county hospital, mid-40s, with short dark hair and the kind of calm demeanor you develop from working emergency room night shifts. She answered the door in scrubs, still wearing her ID badge. I introduced myself and explained why I was there. She didn't hesitate. She walked me inside, pulled a file folder from a drawer, and handed it to me. Inside were 11 letters from Pine Ridge HOA, the earliest dated November of 2023. The demands started at $250 and climbed to $900. The most recent letter, from 2 weeks ago, included a photocopy of a fake foreclosure notice. Jenna had circled it in red pen and written fraud across the top in capital letters. I called a real estate attorney in Denver, she said. He told me to ignore it, said it had no legal standing, but it still scared me. That's the point, isn't it? To scare people into paying. I told her she was right. Then I asked if she'd be willing to testify if this went to court. She said yes, without blinking. By the time I got back to my cabin, it was 3 in the afternoon. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and created a new spreadsheet. 4 columns. Name, amount demanded, amount paid, documentation. I filled in every row with the information I'd collected. Owen Blackford demanded up to $500, paid 0, has 5 letters. Miller Hart demanded up to $1,200, paid $500, has 6 letters plus a receipt. Jenna Colebrook demanded up to $900, paid 0, has 11 letters, including a fake foreclosure. Reed Dalton demanded $750, paid 0, has 3 letters, plus a fake lien sign. Total fraudulent demands across 4 victims, $3,550. Total paid under duress, $500. I saved the file, exported it to PDF, and emailed it to Lydia with the subject line, Pattern Evidence, 4 victims, Systematic Fraud. Lydia replied 20 minutes later. This is solid, really solid. I'll draft a civil complaint for fraud and file it next week. But Reed, be careful. Karen's out on bail as of 2 p.m. today. She knows you're the reason she spent 6 hours in jail. If I were her, I'd be planning my next move right now. I read the message twice. Then I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at my driveway. Everything was quiet. The trees, the sky. The gravel road leads down to the highway. But quiet doesn't mean safe. I checked my cameras. All online, all recording. Then I sat back down and waited for whatever came next. Lydia sent the cease and desist letter 3 days after Karen made bail. She used certified mail, return receipt requested, the kind that requires a signature and leaves a paper trail you can't ignore. The letter was 4 pages long, typed on Foster and Associates letterhead, and it didn't mince words. It demanded that Karen Whitmore, Douglas Fairbank, and Ronald Pierce immediately cease all contact with Reed Dalton and the 3 other victims we'd identified. No more letters, no more fees, no more signs, no more trespassing. The language was surgical. It cited Colorado revised statutes on fraud, trespass, and harassment. It included a timeline of every letter, every fake notice, every escalation. It attached copies of the property deeds proving none of the cabins fell under Pine Ridge HOA jurisdiction. And it ended with a warning. If the harassment continued, Lydia would file a civil lawsuit for damages and request a restraining order. The deadline for compliance was 72 hours from receipt. I asked Lydia what she thought would happen. She said one of 2 things. Either Karen would back off and disappear, or she'd lose her mind and go nuclear. I told her I was betting on nuclear. The 72 hours came and went. No response from Karen. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence. Then, on the 4th day, I got an email. The sender was listed as Pine Ridge HOA Legal Department. The subject line read, "Notice of foreclosure proceedings. Unpaid HOA liens." I opened it standing in my kitchen, coffee mug in one hand, phone in the other. The email was 2 paragraphs of boilerplate legal language that sounded official but didn't quite scan right. It claimed that I owed $750 in overdue fees, that a lien had been filed against my property, and that foreclosure proceedings would begin within 30 days unless I paid in full. At the bottom of the email was a signature block. Ronald Pierce, Esquire, General Counsel, Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Lydia without comment. She called me 6 minutes later. Her voice was clipped, professional, but I could hear the anger underneath. "Reed, Ronald Pierce is not a lawyer. I checked the Colorado Bar Association database before I sent the cease. He's not licensed, never has been. This email is an unauthorized practice of law, which is a felony in Colorado." I asked her what that meant for me. She said it meant 2 things. First, the email had 0 legal standing. It was a theater. Second, Ronald had just handed us a gift-wrapped piece of evidence that could land him in prison for up to 3 years. She told me to forward the email to Sheriff Briggs and not to respond to Ronald directly. I did exactly that. Briggs replied an hour later, saying he'd add it to the open case file. Then I sat down at my computer and opened my spam folder. 3 more emails were waiting, all sent within the last 24 hours from different addresses, all with the same subject line, "Community Alert. Dangerous resident threatening HOA personnel." I opened the first one and scanned the recipient list. 15 names, including Owen, Miller, and Jenna. The body was short and vicious. It claimed I'd threatened HOA board members with a firearm during a routine inspection, called me hostile and unstable, and warned people to exercise caution if they encountered me. Attached was a photo of me on my porch, holding my shotgun, shot from across my yard at an angle that made me look dangerous. The second and third emails were identical but sent to different groups. I counted the total recipients across all 3. 43 people who now thought I was an armed lunatic living in the woods. I screenshot every email, saved the photo, and sent everything to Lydia. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a coordinated attack on 3 fronts: legal intimidation through fake foreclosure notices, social isolation through mass defamation, psychological pressure through surveillance and public smearing. Karen wasn't trying to collect fees. She was trying to destroy me, make me the villain, force me out or force me to break. Lydia's reply came fast. "This is defamation. Actionable. I'm amending the cease to include a formal demand for retraction." Then a second message. "Watch your back. This is what desperation looks like." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those 43 people. Most of them probably lived within 10 miles. Some might believe what they read. Some might not. But all of them now had my address and a reason to be afraid of me. That wasn't an accident. That was a strategy. Karen was isolating me, turning the community against me, making me the problem instead of her. It was smart in a vicious kind of way, and it might have worked if I didn't have documentation for everything she'd done. I got out of bed at 11 p.m., pulled on a hoodie, and walked out onto the porch. The night was clear and cold, the kind that makes your breath fog and your ears ache. I stood there listening to the silence, watching the tree line. Nothing. Just wind and darkness and the distant sound of an owl somewhere in the pines. Then my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Driveway camera. I opened the app. A black SUV was idling at the end of my driveway. Headlights off, engine running. I couldn't see the plates or the driver, but I could see someone standing outside holding up a phone, pointing it toward my cabin, recording me. I stayed where I was, back against the cabin wall, deep in the shadows where the porch light didn't reach. Every instinct said to walk down there, confront them, make them leave. But confrontation was what they wanted. A reaction, something they could film and spin into proof I was dangerous. So I stood still and let my cameras do the work they were designed to do. After 30 seconds, a second person got out of the SUV. Both of them held phones now, both aimed at my cabin. I watched them for 2 full minutes. They didn't move closer, didn't approach, just filmed. Then they climbed back into the vehicle and drove away slowly. No hurry, like they had all the time in the world. I saved the footage, checked the timestamp, and sent it to Sheriff Briggs with a 2-word message. "Stalking incident," he replied at 11:40 p.m. "I see it. We'll follow up tomorrow." I went back inside, locked the door, and sat down at my computer. I zoomed in on the clearest frame. The person holding the phone was tall, thin, and wearing a jacket I recognized from the HOA meeting footage. Ronald Pierce. The next morning, I called Lydia before breakfast. She answered on the first ring. Already awake. Already working. I told her about the surveillance. The SUV. Ronald is filming my cabin at 11 p.m. She didn't sound surprised. "He's trying to intimidate you, probably hoping you'll do something stupid he can use against you in court." I asked what she wanted me to do. She said exactly what I'd already done. Document everything. Don't engage. Let them keep digging their own graves. Then she told me something I wasn't expecting. "Read, I filed the amended cease this morning. I also filed a motion for a temporary restraining order against Karen, Douglas, and Ronald. The hearing's set for next week. If the judge grants it, they won't be able to come within 500 feet of you or your property." I asked what the odds were. She said 70-30 in our favor. But here's the thing. A restraining order is a piece of paper. It doesn't stop someone who's already decided the rules don't apply to them. I thanked her and hung up. Then I poured coffee, walked out to my mailbox, and found it empty. No letters, no signs, nothing. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt the opposite. Because people like Karen Whitmore don't go quiet unless they're planning something loud. I walked back to the cabin, sat down at my computer, and opened my evidence folder. 42 files now. Video, photos, emails, scanned letters, receipts, witness statements. Enough to bury Karen and her entire fake HOA operation. But evidence only matters if you live long enough to use it. I checked the cameras one more time. All clear. Then I checked the locks, the windows, and the gun cabinet. Everything secure. Everything is in place. And I settled into the kind of waiting that wears you down from the inside. The kind where every car engine in the distance makes you look up. Every motion alert makes your pulse spike. Every hour of silence feels heavier than the last. It came 2 days later, and it came quietly. Not another surveillance run or threatening email. Just a plain white envelope in my mailbox. Hand-delivered sometime between midnight and 6 a.m. No postage, no return address. Just my name in those same block letters I'd been seeing for months. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Emergency Pine Ridge HOA meeting. Topic expansion approval vote. Date, May 30th, 7 p.m. Location, Pine Ridge Community Center. Attendance is mandatory for all affected properties. I read it standing at the end of my driveway, morning sun just breaking over the ridge, and felt something cold settle in my chest. This was it, the endgame. They were going to try to legitimize everything in public, outvote me, create a paper trail that said I'd been given a chance to participate and refused. I pulled out my phone, photographed the invitation, and sent it to Lydia. She called back in under a minute. "They're setting a trap, a public meeting where they can outvote you, claim legitimacy, and try to force you into compliance." I asked if they could actually do that. She said no. But they don't care about legality anymore. They care about optics. If they can make it look like a democratic process, they think that gives them cover. I asked what she thought I should do. She didn't hesitate. Go to the meeting. Bring your laptop. Bring your evidence. And burn their whole operation to the ground in front of witnesses. I spent the next 3 days preparing for that meeting the way I used to prepare for project presentations when I was still working. Methodically, obsessively, with the kind of attention to detail that turns a good case into an airtight one. The difference was that back then, the worst thing that could happen was losing a contract. Now, the worst thing that could happen was letting Karen Whitmore walk away thinking she'd won. I wasn't going to let that happen. The first thing I did was drive to the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and file a formal written complaint. Not a phone call, not an email. A physical document with my signature on it, filed into the official record where it couldn't be ignored or deleted. Sheriff Briggs met me in the lobby, looking tired but alert. He walked me back to a small interview room with cinder block walls and a metal table. I sat down and slid a 3-ring binder across to him. Inside were printed copies of everything: the fake HOA letters, the defamation emails, the stalking footage, the fake foreclosure notice from Ronald Pierce, the plywood lien sign, all of it organized with tabs and timestamps. Briggs opened the binder and started flipping through pages. He didn't say anything for the first 5 minutes, just read. When he got to the section on Ronald Pierce's fake legal notice, he stopped and looked up. "You know this is a felony, right? Unauthorized practice of law." I nodded. My lawyer confirmed it. "Colorado Revised Statutes 12-5-116, Class 6 felony, up to 18 months in prison." Briggs grunted and kept reading. When he finished, he closed the binder and leaned back in his chair. "Read. I arrested Karen Whitmore for trespass and attempted fraud 2 weeks ago. She posted bail the same day. Since then, my office has gotten 3 complaints from Pine Ridge residents saying you're the problem, that you threatened them, that you're unstable." He held up a hand before I could respond. "I know it's garbage. I've seen your footage, but it tells me she's escalating, and people who escalate don't stop until someone makes them stop." I asked him what he needed from me. He tapped the binder. "This is good, really good, but if you want criminal charges that stick, I need more than documentation. I need witnesses, people who'll testify that Karen's been running this scam for years, that it's not just you." I told him I had 3: Owen Blackford, Miller Hart, Jenna Colebrook. Briggs wrote down their names and said he'd follow up. Then he asked me something I wasn't expecting. "You going to that HOA meeting?" I said yes. He frowned. "You sure that's smart? Walking into a room full of her supporters?" I met his eyes. "I'm not walking in unprepared." Briggs studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "If you're going, I'll have a deputy in the parking lot, just in case." I thanked him, took my binder, and left. Back at the cabin, I opened my laptop and started building the presentation. Not PowerPoint. I didn't need slides. I needed a timeline, a visual map that showed every step of Karen's operation from the first fake letter to the stalking incident 2 nights ago. I created a document with 3 columns: date, event, evidence. I populated it with 47 entries. Each one had a corresponding file: a photo, a video clip, a scanned letter, a screenshot. I organized them in a folder on my desktop labeled HOA Meeting Evidence and made 3 backup copies. One on a thumb drive, one on an external hard drive. One is uploaded to the cloud. Then I called Lydia and walked her through what I was planning to do. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh you make when you realize someone just handed you a winning hand. "Reed, if you pull this off, Karen's not just going to lose the meeting. She's going to lose everything." I asked her to clarify. She said the problem with people like Karen Whitmore is that they build their power on perception. They're not elected officials. They're not government agents. They're private citizens who convinced other private citizens to give them authority. But that authority only exists as long as people believe in it, Lydia said. The second you prove in public that she's been lying, committing fraud, and harassing people outside her jurisdiction, that authority evaporates, and everyone who supported her becomes a liability she can't afford. I asked if there was anything else I should know before walking into that room. Lydia's tone shifted. Yeah, Karen's going to have a plan too. She's not stupid. She knows you're coming. She knows you have evidence. So she's going to try to control the narrative. Frame you as the aggressor. Make you look unreasonable. Don't take the bait. Stay calm. Stick to facts. Let the evidence speak. I spent the next 2 days rehearsing. Not out loud. Just in my head. I walked through every possible question, every objection, every attempt to derail me. I imagined Karen interrupting. Douglas is trying to shout me down. Ronald is threatening me with legal action. And I practiced my responses. Short, direct, emotionless. The kind of answers that shut down arguments before they start. On the morning of May 30th, I woke up at 5 a.m. and went for a run through the forest behind my cabin. 3 miles out, 3 miles back. The kind of run that clears your head and burns off nervous energy. When I got back, I showered, made coffee, and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop. I opened the evidence folder one more time and reviewed every file. Then I packed my bag, laptop, charger, USB drive with the presentation, external hard drive as backup, printed timeline in a binder, voice recorder, phone fully charged. I zipped it all up and set it by the door. At 6 p.m., I loaded everything into my truck and started driving. The Pine Ridge Community Center was 12 miles south on Highway 85, a low brick building with a gravel parking lot and a flagpole out front. I pulled in at 6:45. There were already 20 cars in the lot. I recognized a few. Owen's old Subaru, Miller's pickup, Jenna's Civic. The rest were strangers. I parked near the exit, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the front doors. A woman in her 50s was standing outside smoking a cigarette. She looked at me, looked at my bag, and stubbed out her cigarette. You, Reed Dalton. I nodded. She didn't smile. Karen's inside. She's been telling everyone you're going to make a scene. I looked at the building. Through the windows, I could see people filling the rows of folding chairs. I'm not here to make a scene, I said. I'm here to tell the truth. The woman studied me for a second. Then she opened the door and held it for me. Good luck. I walked inside. The community center was one big room with fluorescent lights, a tile floor, and a folding table set up at the front like a makeshift podium. Karen Whitmore sat behind it, flanked by Douglas Fairbank and Ronald Pierce. All three of them stopped talking when I walked in. 40 people turned in their seats to look at me. I didn't look back. I just walked to the third row, sat down next to Owen, and set my bag on the floor. Owen leaned over and whispered, "You ready?" I nodded. Karen stood up, picked up a gavel I didn't know she had, and banged it twice on the table. "Let's begin." That Karen banged the gavel twice more, and the room went quiet. She stood behind the folding table like it was a judge's bench, clipboard in hand, flanked by Douglas and Ronald. Her voice was loud, clear, the kind of voice you use when you want to sound authoritative. "This emergency meeting of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association is now in session. The purpose of tonight's gathering is to vote on the proposed expansion of our jurisdiction to include properties currently outside our subdivision boundaries. This expansion is necessary to maintain property values and community standards across the entire region." She gestured to a poster board propped up on an easel beside her. It was the same hand-drawn map I'd seen in the third letter, blown up to 3 feet by 4 feet, with red circles around my cabin and the 4 others. "As you can see," Karen continued, "these properties benefit from the roads, infrastructure, and security measures funded by Pine Ridge HOA dues. It's only fair that they contribute." A woman in the front row raised her hand. Karen nodded at her. "How much are we asking them to pay?" Karen smiled. "The standard annual fee of $500, plus a one-time expansion enrollment fee of $250. Murmurs rippled through the room. I stayed silent, watching. Owen sat beside me, arms crossed, face unreadable. Miller was 3 rows back. Jenna sat near the door. Karen continued. "We've sent multiple notices to the affected property owners. Most have ignored our outreach. One has been actively hostile." She looked directly at me. "Mr. Reed Dalton has threatened HOA personnel, refused all communication, and created a dangerous environment for volunteers trying to do their jobs. Tonight, We're voting to formalize the expansion. A simple majority is all we need. She held up a stack of paper ballots. We'll distribute these now. Please mark yes or no and return them to the front. I stood up. Every head in the room turned toward me. Karen's smile froze. Mr. Dalton, you're not a member of this association. You don't have a vote. I kept my voice level. Calm. I'm not here to vote. I'm here to speak. And according to Robert's Rules of Order, any person affected by a vote has the right to address the assembly before that vote takes place. Karen's jaw tightened. Douglas leaned over and whispered something to her. She shook her head. This isn't a public forum. This is a private HOA meeting. I looked around the room. 40 people are staring at me. Then why did you invite me? Your notice said attendance was mandatory for all affected properties. That makes this a public proceeding. And I have a right to respond to your accusations before you ask these people to vote. Karen hesitated. I could see her calculating. If she refused, she looked afraid. If she agreed, she lost control. Ronald Pierce stood up, his voice shaky. You have 2 minutes, Mr. Dalton. Then we vote. I nodded, pulled my laptop out of my bag, walked to the front of the room. I'll need to use the projector. Karen started to object, but someone in the back called out, Let him talk. Another voice echoed it. Karen sat down, her face tight. I connected my laptop to the projector mounted on the ceiling and opened my evidence folder. The first image filled the screen. My property deed. This is the legal deed to my property at 4215 Pine Forest Road. Purchased September 15th, 2022. Recorded with Douglas County. As you can see here, I pointed to a highlighted section. There is no HOA covenant, no CC and Rs, no restrictions of any kind. My land is not part of the Pine Ridge subdivision. It never has been. I clicked to the next slide. A map from the Douglas County Assessor's Office showing parcel boundaries. My property was clearly outside the subdivision line. This is the official county plat map. The red line shows the Pine Ridge boundary. My property is here. I pointed. 2 miles outside that boundary. Karen Whitmore knows this. She's known it from the beginning. I clicked again. The first fake HOA letter appeared on screen. Despite this, I received 3 letters demanding payment of HOA fees I don't owe. Click. The second letter. Click. The third letter with the hand-drawn expansion map. This map, I said, pointing to the screen, is not a legal document. It was drawn by hand and photocopied. It has no standing, no authority. It's fiction. I heard murmurs behind me. Karen's voice cut through. You're wasting everyone's time. We voted to expand. The board approved it. I turned to look at her. Who voted? Show me the meeting minutes. Show me the quorum. Show me the recorded vote. Karen's face went red. We don't owe you documentation. I clicked to the next slide. The video footage from May 22nd, 5:12 a.m. Karen, Douglas, and Ronald on my porch, measuring my windows. The timestamp was clear. The audio was clear. You could hear Karen giving orders. See the tape measure against my window frame. The room went dead silent. I let it play for 30 seconds. Then I paused it. This is criminal trespass. Recorded at 5:12 a.m. on my property without permission, without notice, without legal authority. Sheriff Briggs arrested all 3 of them that morning. I glanced at Karen. She was staring at the screen, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I clicked again. The plywood lien sign appeared. After the arrest, someone left this on my mailbox. It claims there's a lien on my property for unpaid HOA dues. I called the Douglas County clerk. There is no lien. This sign is fraudulent. I clicked to the next slide. The email from Ronald Pierce. This email was sent to me 4 days ago. It's signed by Ronald Pierce, Esquire, claiming to be general counsel for Pine Ridge HOA. I looked at Ronald. His face had gone pale. I checked the Colorado Bar Association. Ronald Pierce is not a licensed attorney. He never has been. Sending legal notices while claiming to be a lawyer is a felony under Colorado law. Unauthorized practice of law. Class 6 felony. Ronald started to stand up, but Douglas grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. I kept going. Click. The first defamation email appeared on screen. This email was sent to 43 people 2 days ago. It claims I threatened HOA personnel with a firearm and that I'm dangerous and unstable. Attached is a photo of me holding my legally owned shotgun on my own property after calling 911 to report trespassers. I clicked through the other 2 emails. Same text, same photo, different recipient lists. This is defamation. It's coordinated. It's malicious. And it's designed to isolate me and turn this community against me. The last slide was the stalking footage. The black SUV at the end of my driveway. 11 p.m. 2 people holding phones, filming my cabin. I zoomed in on the clearest frame. Ronald Pierce's face was visible. This happened 2 nights ago. That's Ronald Pierce, recording my home, at 11 p.m., without permission. That's stalking under Colorado Revised Statutes 18-3-602. I closed the laptop and looked out at the room. No one was looking at Karen anymore. They were all looking at me. You were told I'm dangerous, that I threatened people, that I'm the problem. But everything you just saw is documented, time-stamped, backed up, and every bit of it proves that Karen Whitmore, Douglas Fairbank, and Ronald Pierce have been running a fraud operation, demanding money from people who don't owe it, trespassing, lying, defaming, stalking, not because they care about property values, because they want control. Karen stood up, her voice shaking with rage. This is slander. You're twisting everything. We have the right to enforce community standards. I turned to face her. You have no rights on my property. You have no jurisdiction. You have no authority. And now you have no credibility. The room erupted. People started talking all at once. Someone shouted a question I couldn't hear. Another person stood up and pointed at Karen. Owen was on his feet. So was Miller. So was Jenna. Karen banged her gavel, but no one was listening anymore. Then the back door opened. Sheriff Nolan Briggs walked in. Deputy Carter Wells right behind him. The room went quiet again. Briggs walked slowly to the front, his boots echoing on the tile floor. He looked at Karen. "Ba Whitmore, I have a warrant for your arrest. Violation of bail conditions, conspiracy to commit defamation, and obstruction of justice." He turned to Ronald. "Ong Pierce, you're also under arrest. Unauthorized practice of law and stalking." Karen's face went white. "You can't do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone." Briggs pulled out his handcuffs. "Turn around, ma'am." This time, Karen didn't argue. She turned. Briggs cuffed her wrists behind her back. Deputy Wells did the same to Ronald. Douglas Fairbanks sat frozen in his chair, staring straight ahead like he was hoping no one would notice him. Briggs read them their rights in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Then he walked them both out the back door. The room stayed silent for a full 10 seconds after they left. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first. Then others joined in. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. I didn't smile, didn't bow. I just packed up my laptop, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward the exit. Owen caught up with me in the parking lot. "Reed, that was incredible." I shook my head. "It was necessary." He looked back at the building. "What happens now?" I climbed into my truck. "Now we wait for the trial." The arrest made the local news the next morning. Douglas County Sheriff's Office issued a press release at 8 a.m. Karen Whitmore and Ronald Pierce had been charged with multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit fraud, criminal trespass, unauthorized practice of law, stalking, and defamation. Bail was set at $20,000 each. By noon, my phone had 16 missed calls. Reporters, neighbors I'd never met. 2 real estate attorneys are asking if I need representation. I ignored all of them, except one. Lydia called at 1 p.m. Her voice was bright, energized in a way I hadn't heard before. "Reed, the district attorney's office just contacted me. They want to use your evidence for the prosecution. This is going to trial." I asked when. She said the preliminary hearing was scheduled for June 15th, full trial likely in August. "And here's the interesting part," she continued. 3 more people came forward this morning, cabin owners who got the same letters Karen sent you. They want to join a class action lawsuit. I asked her what that meant. She explained it simply. If we could prove Karen had defrauded multiple people as part of a systematic scheme, we could sue, not just for the money she'd demanded, but for punitive damages. We're talking tens of thousands. Read, maybe more. Enough to shut down her entire operation permanently. I told her to draft whatever she needed. I'd sign it. She said she'd have documents ready by the end of the week. Then her tone shifted. But Reed, there's something else. Karen posted bail 2 hours ago, and her lawyer filed a countersuit against you 30 minutes later. I felt my jaw tighten. For what? Lydia sighed. Defamation, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress. It's a slap suit. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She's trying to intimidate you into dropping everything. I asked if it would work. Lydia laughed. Not even close. Colorado has strong anti-slap laws. I'll file a motion to dismiss within 48 hours. But it tells you something about her mindset. She genuinely believes she can lawyer her way out of this. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sun set behind the pines. My phone buzzed. A text from Owen. Just got a call from Pine Ridge HOA treasurer. Douglas Fairbanks resigned. The board is dissolved. You did it. I read the message twice. Then I typed back. We did it. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. The kind of tired that comes from months of watching your back, documenting every threat, living in a state of low-grade combat readiness. I wanted to believe it was over. But I knew better. Karen Whitmore wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. She'd fight until the judge's gavel came down. Maybe even after that. I stood up, walked inside, and opened my laptop one last time. The evidence folder was still there. 47 files. Organized. Backed up. Ready. I closed it and shut down the computer. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The trial took place on August 15th in the Douglas County Courthouse. I sat in the gallery with Lydia on my left and Owen on my right. The prosecution presented 47 pieces of evidence. Every letter, every email, every video clip, every fraudulent document that Karen and her board had created over 18 months. The defense tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, that Karen believed she had authority, that no actual harm had been done. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Karen Whitmore was found guilty on 4 counts: criminal trespass, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. 90 days in county jail with 60 days suspended, 300 hours of community service, a $5,000 fine, and 3 years probation. She was also ordered to cease all HOA operations permanently. Ronald Pierce received 60 days of jail time suspended, 200 hours of community service, and a lifetime ban from practicing or claiming to practice law. Douglas Fairbank pleaded no contest to trespass, paid a $2,000 fine, and walked away. The civil case was settled out of court in September. Karen agreed to pay restitution to all 7 victims who'd come forward. Total settlement, $18,000 plus legal fees. My share was $3,200. I donated half to the Douglas County Legal Aid Fund. The rest went into a savings account I never touched. Lydia's motion to dismiss Karen's slap suit was granted in less than a week. The judge called it frivolous and ordered Karen to pay my legal fees. $12,000. She appealed, lost, paid. By October, the silence had returned to my property. Real silence this time. Not the kind weighted with waiting, but the kind that comes from knowing the threat is gone. I sat on my porch one morning with coffee and watched a pair of elk move through the clearing behind my kyun. My phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. New neighbors moving in 2 miles west. Told them to call you if they get any weird HOA letters. I smiled and typed back. Send them my number. A week later, a man in his 30s knocked on my door. Travis Delroy, new cabin owner. He'd heard the story from Owen. Wanted to thank me. I told him the same thing I'd told everyone else. Know your property rights. Document everything. Never back down when you're in the right. He shook my hand and left. I walked back to my porch, sat down, and looked out at the forest. 45 acres of pine and quiet. No HOA, no Karen, no threats. Just land that answered to nobody but me. I'd bought this place for silence. For 3 years. I had it. Then I lost it. Now I had it back, and this time I knew exactly what it was worth. You don't need to be loud to win. You need to be right, documented, and relentless. If this story hit home, or if you've ever dealt with someone abusing their power, let me know in the comments. Share this with anyone fighting their own battle, and subscribe to Karma Fence for more real stories, where ordinary people stand their ground and prove that justice isn't just a concept, it's a consequence. The kind that catches up when you least expect it.